You are listening to Realign Your Life podcast, where I discuss with you strategies on how to realign your life and move towards the direction you always want to. I am Vivian, the host of this podcast, and every week I will bring value on how to improve and realign your life either through a guest or my thoughts. I can't wait to share what we have this week. It's time to realign your life. Well. Welcome back to Realign Your Life podcast. I am so honored and I am so thankful that you're here with me today. This is Vivian, the host of the show, and I am so excited about this episode. You know, previously, in the previous episode, we had an interview with Dr. Willie Mae Abel, who is a professor of nursing at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And she gave us some really good and powerful information about our lifestyle and how hypertension or how high blood pressure can affect the quality of our lives. So Dr. Abel is back with us in this episode to share some more really powerful information that you need to hear. And in case you missed that last episode, I want you to go back and listen, but I'm going to tell you and give you some of her credentials and why she is an expert in this field. So Dr. Abel, hello to you and welcome back.
Thank you.
Yes. So as I said, she is a professor of nursing, an associate professor of nursing at the University of North Carolina, where she did her undergraduate work and got a bachelor's degree in nursing. She also has her master's and her doctorate degrees in nursing from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. She is part of many nursing organizations, one being Sigma Theta Tau, which is an honor society of nurses. So you got to be really great to be in that organization. She is my soror and sister in Chi Eta Phi Sorority Incorporated, which is a professional nursing organization. And Dr. Abel has received many, many awards and recognitions, and she has authored and co-authored many articles, and she can be found in many publications. But her expertise, part of her expertise is in research, which includes prevention of cardiovascular disease, because she knows that is a disease that affects one ethnic group a lot more than it does others, and she has a particular interest in women's health. Now, I had the honor of being part of a research group that she did. So back in 2018 through 2023, Dr. Abel was awarded a 5-year grant or award from the National Institute of Health. Now, we all know about the National Institute of Health. Y'all heard a whole lot about that during COVID, okay? So she earned a K01 Mental Research Scientist Development Award from the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. And that award was funded in part to conduct a randomized controlled trial to test the effectiveness of a chronic disease and self-management. How would that work? And she used this program. This program used some interactive technology and enhancement for catching Black women with uncontrolled hypertension. So with that research award, Dr. Abel was able to help some women to get total control of their blood pressure. So with that, Dr. Abel, I want to ask you this question, since you've done all of this research. Is there a particular ethnic group where you find more cases of hypertension?
Actually, the prevalence of hypertension in Black people in the United States is the highest, among the highest in the world, to the tune that over 50%, almost 60% of Black males and females in the United States have high blood pressure.
What, will you repeat that statistic again?
Yes, to be exact, 57.5% of Black males and 58.4% of Black females in the United States over the age of 21 have high blood pressure.
Wow. And why is that? Is there a genetic factor there that plays into that, or lifestyle?
For several decades, there was a general understanding that hypertension among African Americans had a genetic predisposition that related to sodium retention and the slavery hypertension hypothesis. That was a popular theory, but I want to say that there's a lack of definitive evidence to support this. It was proposed that Blacks were more likely to suffer from a genetic mutation because of the heat in Africa, limited salt supplies and that type of thing, and it made them have a genetic predisposition to salt retention. But the evidence actually shows that normal salt-resistant people retain just as much sodium as salt-sensitive subjects in salt loading, and they don't develop hypertension. So what is thought is that there are multiple genes that are involved in the process, and that the underlying mechanism of hypertension is multifactorial. So when you look at Black people here in the United States, it's a combination of environmental, behavioral, psychosocial, all of these things have an impact on hypertension and disability in African Americans.
Wow. That is some good information. And there's so much going on in our society today about not knowing historical information and, kind of pushing that all under the rug. But this is the kind of information that we need to know. So in your research, what have you found to be the cause of those high percentages of Black males and females being, having cases of hypertension?
Well, if you ask a group of Black women what the cause of their high blood pressure is, the number one answer is stress. The number one answer is stress. And I briefly mentioned earlier that stress in the Black community is quite different from stress from other racial ethnic groups. The stress of racism, the stress of discrimination, the stress of our environments that we live in that are segregated, food deserts and all types of things, create stressors in the Black community. Low socioeconomic status, it's just a number of different stressors that affect the health of Black people in this country.
Wow. And this is what the women in your research shared with you. So
Well, interesting. The women in my research study, over 70% had higher socioeconomic statuses. And what we find is that regardless as to whether a Black individual is low or high socioeconomic status, that the problems of racism, discrimination, and all of those things affect us equally and can contribute to stressors that end up that end up with people being hypertensive.
Wow. And I know that many of our listeners out there can relate to that or can attest to that in some way or another. And sometimes it's kind of subtle there. And if you're in that hostile environment that, you know, you internalize all of that and you go home and you kick the cat or the dog, but that still doesn't, but you're right back in that same environment, you know, continuously. So that's bombarding. And I think you mentioned in the previous episode about the gene changing. So are those some of the factors that are causing those genes to change?
Yes, think about it for just a second. If you're a low socioeconomic status or if you're all stressed out, what's the likelihood of eating right? Most people overeat. What's the likelihood of getting out doing physical activity? You just want to sit there and sulk, you know? So the stressors affect every part of our lives that could impact our ability to better care for ourselves.
Mm. So what kind of strategies can we use or can we implement to maybe improve that or improve the awareness? So if you don't know something, if you don't know what you don't know. So what are some of the strategies that, because this is so good, what are some of the strategies that we can put in place?
Well, as I mentioned, you know, Blacks overall, especially women, are physically inactive. And, you know, exercise is not a bad word. You know, we're overweight or obese because we sit down on our bodies, and our bodies respond if we use them. You know, so, you know, getting people to understand that we have to take control. We have to self-manage, regardless of our situation and our circumstances. We have to learn to take care of self. And that's very important. You know, if you think about physical activity, you know, striving to do 30 to 60 minutes of something that you enjoy doing, you know, because if you don't enjoy doing it, you won't do it. And it could be things like walking or jogging, swimming, bicycling, jumping rope, dances like Zumba, you know. And the main thing you're trying to do is to increase your heart rate and your body's use of oxygen. And the goal is, you know, once you increase your heart rate, your breathing, you know, this will help, you know, with your heart health. And the aim is to do this 3 to 5 days a week. Personally, I like to engage in physical activity every day because it helps you develop lifestyle changes. And the same thing about eating, you know, it's a lifestyle change. And we have to make personal decisions about what we're going to do to care for self. That's very important.
Well, you know, you talked about earlier also food deserts. So we're not privy to, you know, a Publix or a Kroger's in our neighborhood. And, you know, we are going to the mom and pop and not putting them down. They serve their purpose in community, but to be able to get fresh vegetables or, you know, healthy foods or those healthy proteins that we need in our bodies or the carbs. And, you know, people beat up carbohydrates, but there is a place for carbohydrates also, but you don't need 50,000 calories of carb. You know, that doesn't have to be your entire diet. So, and I applaud the fact that you talked about us being advocates for our own health care. So I think you talked in the previous episode about what you do when you go to the doctors. And as Blacks or African Americans, what would you say to them about taking ownership? Because those numbers, those percentages are just off the chart. What can we do to begin to change that?
You know, bottom line, I think you had mentioned awareness. improving awareness of hypertension and prevention in our communities. That's very important. And the thing we have to note is that 90% of the time, hypertension is a preventable condition. It's only 10% of the time that is caused by other illnesses that we can't prevent. So increasing awareness of the necessity of lifestyle changes and modifications. And one way to do that is through community outreach with the use of community health workers. Lay members of the community who have the same ethnicity, language, income, life experiences with the people they serve. They can be trained to use health educational materials to help people in the community improve their quality of life and adopt heart healthy behaviors. These people reach people where they live, eat, play, where they worship, and it's very important, to use people who look like you to get that information across to individuals about what they can do differently.
Well, I love that, and I love that that perspective, because if you look like me or you can relate to me, and culturally, I am going to be more apt to listen to you, because we may have some of the same experiences, or even if we don't, somewhere back in the background there has been that experience. And also, but you talk about making it available and putting that word out in community. I know that there are a lot of churches and also health fairs that just do blood pressure checks. So is that enough? Is just checking the blood pressure and saying your blood pressure is this? How do we begin to really educate people?
And that is it. Knowledge is powerful. Mm-hmm. People need to know not only what their blood pressure numbers are, but what to do about it. And, what to do to maintain a healthy lifestyle. When I mentioned the community lay workers, various racial ethnic groups, Black, Latino, Asians, have used community health workers. And with the work that they do, working alongside of people, they have had tremendous results in decreasing blood pressure. I just can't overemphasize that people need to know. Like, for instance, when you go to the doctor, they talk with you just a few minutes, throw you on some medication, and expect for you to go out and do. But I found, even in the group of women in my research study, again, over 70% were highly educated, but these women did not know how to take care of themselves. And one woman in the study asked the question, why have our physicians not given us this information?
Wow.
Why haven't our physicians not given us this information? So it's not just people of lower socioeconomic status, it's across the board. People do not know how to take care of themselves, how to do the basics. And, trying to get the word out into communities, I think that's the starting point.
Wow. So you mentioned the women in your research group. Can you give us a little bit more information or share a little bit more about how that worked and the result, maybe some of the results that you saw in that?
Yeah, as you mentioned, this was a clinical trial. And what that means is that I had two groups. I had one group who had what was called coaching and one group who did not. When I started out the study, it was 90 women. We started out with a chronic disease self-management program for 6 weeks, and all the women received this particular program. And the goal was to get women to all have a basic knowledge of how to take care of themselves, how to monitor their blood pressure, how to eat right, physical activity, how to talk with your physicians, take your medications correctly, improve your mood, all of these types of things and more. But I wanted everybody to be on the same page. And then we separated them into two groups. One group got coaching, one group did not get coaching. And what that involved was that me following up with them, on a weekly basis, initially every 2 weeks, and then it staggered out at longer lengths of time. But all the women in the study were monitored and given equipment. For instance, they got a blood pressure monitor, a weight scale, they got a Fitbit activity tracker. They could also monitor their medication adherence and their diet, what they were taking in through a MyFitnessPal app. And the technology is such that as these women stepped on their scale, took their blood pressure, these results were available to them and also to me, so we could track them over time. Women who actually engaged in all of the activities, such as taking their blood pressure every day, weighing themselves, monitoring what they ate, engaging in physical activity, had tremendous results. During the course of the study, the largest weight loss was 50 pounds.
Wow.
Had a couple of women who came off their blood pressure medicines or decreased their blood pressure medication.
Wow.
And even after the study ended, I got follow-ups from women who continued to do the things that we talked about in the classes and in the study. One woman lost 103 pounds.
Wow.
103 pounds. And of course, she's no longer on blood pressure medicine. So,
my goodness.
Just doing simple things, eating right, physical activity, keeping your weight under control, helps not only with hypertension, diabetes, and some of the other chronic diseases. So again, getting the information out that we can do simple things to take care of ourselves. But the thing is, it has to be a lifestyle change. We can't do it for a moment and then, forget about it. It's a daily thing that we have to do.
It's realigning our lives.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But one interesting thing I did find in the study, I did a qualitative piece, and I looked at stigma and high blood pressure. Younger women in the study were stigmatized by having a diagnosis of hypertension. They thought it was an old woman's disease. They were ashamed of having high blood pressure, didn't want their friends to know they had it. And that, too, impacted their ability to take their medication and do the things they needed to do to take care of themselves. So we have to look at that stigma associated with it, especially among the young women. But overall, the results, were really good. Those women, again, who engaged in the things that we talked about in this had tremendous results. Yeah. And simple things.
Yeah. So, and we know that stigma can kill you.
Yes.
Yeah. Or can lead to, some other deadly and costly diseases.
Yes, absolutely.
And to think, and a lot of people have the idea that once you're on blood pressure medicine, you're always on blood pressure medicine and you can never come out. But I hear you saying that if you are dedicated in changing your lifestyle and realigning your life, that you can either decrease the amount of blood pressure meds that you're on and or completely come off of them.
Yes, that is possible. But I do like to tell people, once hypertensive, always hypertensive. Mm-hmm. So the things you did to come off the blood pressure medicine, you have to continue to do those things or your blood pressure is going to creep back up again. Mm-hmm. Now, when you think about some of the lifestyle changes that we mentioned, again, they have an impact on blood pressure, but it takes time for the blood pressure to come down. Like, for instance, physical activity, it takes 1 to 3 months before you see an effect. But the benefits only going to last as long as you continue the physical activity. And eating a well-balanced diet that's low in sodium, in 1 to 2 weeks, you're going to see some changes in your blood pressure. Eating a healthy diet and engaging in physical activity, it's a win-win situation. And if you're overweight, even losing 5 pounds can lower the blood pressure. Blood pressure medicine does work within hours of a dose. However, it takes weeks for it to get in your system and optimize the levels. But when you combine it with lifestyle changes, again, it's a win-win situation.
Just hear the passion in your voice about this. This is really important. This is really important to you because I guess there is such a love for people and for, ethnic, people, and just to help people to be able to live a better lifestyle. And when you say that once, you are diagnosed as hypertensive, you're always hypertensive, that's sort of like, the chronic alcoholism or any other chronic disease that you have, but we learn to manage it.
Yes.
And manage it.
We manage the high blood pressure, or the high blood pressure will manage us.
Yeah. And who is really in control here?
You're in control.
Yes.
You're in control.
Yes. Because in your studies and in all of the information that you're giving us, it's like you say the blood pressure medicine, helps to bring that blood pressure down. So the body, your body itself is responding to this. And so as that blood, if you drop that blood pressure too fast, is there any hazardness for that?
Generally, if the blood pressure drops too low, people will become symptomatic. They may get a little dizzy, not feel well. But again, these are things they need to be communicating with their healthcare provider. Any side effects that they have need to be communicated. And that's very important, to have an open relationship, an open dialogue with the healthcare provider. And, when we think about side effects from blood pressure medications, there are some common side effects. But the thing to note is that many people do not have side effects from taking the medications. And if they do have them, they're mild, and they usually go away within a few weeks. But any side effects people have, they should communicate it. They should never suffer in silence. And again, I want to emphasize, they should never, ever change the dosage of their medication without conferring with their healthcare provider. That's very important.
Can you share with us just a couple of those maybe minor side effects that people may experience?
Common side effects of diarrhea, constipation, dizziness, lightheadedness. Men may have some erection problems, and that's one of the number one reasons men will stop taking high blood pressure medicine. But there are other medications that do not cause that side effect, so the medication can be changed. But again, it's all about communication with the healthcare provider. Yeah. Headache, nausea, vomiting. Some people may have a cough with some medications. But again, if these are problems, communicate it. That's very important. It's very important.
Wow. Such great and wonderful information. Once again, Dr. Abel, I just thank you and I applaud you for the work that you're doing and the information that you're putting out there. So I know that you have some publications that you've done and some more research work, and you've co-authored several papers. So can you share with us how we could find some of those research articles?
Actually, if you just Google me, Willie Mae Abel or Willie Abel, many of the publications are free. They will automatically come up. That's the easiest way.
Yeah, we all love free, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So they can just Google Willie Mae Abel.
My name. Okay. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes even putting in hypertension in Black women. Some of my publications.
Okay. Great. Fabulous. So I just thank you once again for this wonderful information and for sharing with our listeners out there. And listeners, I would say, take this very serious, because hypertension is serious. And I think Dr. Abel mentioned in her previous episode that it is labeled as the silent killer, but it is very, very preventable and manageable. So Dr. Abel.
One other thing I want to mention we didn't talk about, and that's sleep. People may not realize not getting enough sleep can also and establishing good sleep habits are very important, very important. getting at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, it can work. It's tremendous effects on the blood pressure as well. I just wanted to put that out there.
So what does that do? What does adequate sleep, how does that affect the body? What's happening there?
Well, when a person's not sleeping well, high blood pressure puts stress on blood vessels, and it can cause symptoms like a headache, chest pain, difficulty. All of these symptoms can cause sleep difficulty. But again, the less sleep a person gets, the higher the blood pressure goes up. So at least 6 hours of sleep or less can cause increases in the blood pressure. So you need 6 to 9 hours of sleep a night.
Wow. And I know these people that say, oh, I can just function on 2 hours, 3 hours of sleep. I don't need a whole lot of sleep.
No, definitely. It's going to cause some problems, especially over time. So again, trying to get at least 6 to 8 hours of sleep a night is very, very important. Very important. A lot of people, their mind is racing when they go to sleep. They can't fall asleep. But trying to make sure they do something relaxing, like 20 minutes or so before bedtime. And if they're not sleeping, try some listening to some smooth music, reading or something, until they can fall asleep. But setting a time, go to bed at 11, get up at such and such a time, just like you're going to work if you're retired, but that is very important. And if your mind is racing, one thing I found that helps is that if you keep a pad by your bedside, write down what's on your mind. Once you put it on the paper, it's like your mind relaxes.
Yeah.
You pick it up the next day.
Yes. That's great. And having been a part of your study, I've set my phone, the alarm, to cut off at a certain time. So people now, they're calling me and they're like, you didn't answer the phone. No, my phone cuts off at a certain time and it comes back on at a certain time. If it's that urgent, they'll send the police out. So,
getting rid of all of electronic devices and stuff like that, all that screen stuff. Oh man, this is if you sleep, if you're doing it right before you go to bed.
Yes, and it affects your mind. Yeah, everything. And I wanted to mention before we conclude how important all of this is. We, in this last years, several months, we've seen 2 very young men that absolutely collapsed and suffered cardiac arrest on the playing fields. So once again, these are athletic guys, but they also, we can be very, very, there can be something hidden back there unless we really have those open and honest dialogues with our physicians, our healthcare provider.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So again, thank you again. Is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners before we wind down?
I'd just like to share that we are in control of our bodies. We are experts of our own bodies. When we go to the physician, they're experts of medicine, but we know our bodies. So it's up to us to communicate, what is going on with our bodies to our physicians. That is very, very important. And before you go, we pay high dollar to see doctors. Healthcare is very expensive. So make sure that you get your needs met when you go to your doctor. Prepare for the visit. Write down your questions, your concerns. Briefly tell your story. Ask questions. And if you don't understand something, make it known. Make it known. If there's any reason you can't follow the healthcare provider's recommendations, let them know. This medicine affects me in a certain way, and no, I can't take it. Don't just sit there and nod like you're going to do something and you're not going to do it. And maybe they can come together with you and you can find something that works for you. So the bottom line, healthcare is expensive, so get the most for your buck when you go to a physician.
Absolutely. And we do that everywhere else we go, right?
Yes.
Everywhere else we go. So this is the most important thing. One of the things that we did not talk about or discuss, and I want to just maybe talk about that just for a minute or so, is people would say, okay, what is a normal blood pressure?
Okay. A normal blood pressure is 90/60 to 120/80. That is considered a normal blood pressure. If you're on blood pressure medication, then the target blood pressure is going to be less than 130/80. So ideally, they're trying to get your blood pressure within that normal range. But if you're on blood pressure medicine, less than 130/80 is the target recommendation.
Good. Because those numbers are always changing sometimes. So
well, actually, the guidelines changed in 2017, and they hadn't been changed for 14 years, which was 2003. And the reason the guidelines changed was because of a study called the SPRINT study. And in that particular study, what they did was they looked at about 9,000 people, and they were looking at managing the blood pressure less than 120/80. And what they saw was that there were fewer cardiovascular events when the blood pressure was lowered. And thus, this is why we have the 2017 guidelines.
Wow.
You will find that the doctor would usually add a high blood pressure medication if the blood pressure is equal to or greater than 140/90. But if a person is at high risk for heart disease due to hypertension, if they have high blood cholesterol, if they're overweight, diabetes, then blood pressure medicine will probably be started if the pressure is greater than 130/80.
Good. That is great information that we need. So I know that you can click or you can punch on rewind if you didn't get that information, because that's important for you to know. And you listeners out there, if you have found this information to be invaluable and very great and important to you, please share it with someone else that you may think or you feel that needs this information also. And
one other thing I would like to mention very quickly is that if a person has high blood pressure, it's very important that they monitor their blood pressure. And it's suggested that a person does a couple of readings in the morning, a couple of readings in the evening, average those numbers, make sure the pressures are at least 1 minute apart. That's very important because you don't know if your lifestyle recommendations or your medication is working if you don't monitor your blood pressure. And the recommendation is that you monitor, after it's stabilized 1 to 3 days per week. But the bottom line is, again, the only way to know if your high blood pressure medicines and your lifestyle changes are working is to check your blood pressure regularly. I suggest monitoring your blood pressure at least once per day. About the same time each day, get 2 to 3 readings 1 minute apart, average those readings, and that gives you your true blood pressure result.
Great. All right. Y'all heard it. So make sure that you follow through and that you don't become one of those statistics. We don't want that. And that's why I want to share this information and the expertise from Dr. Abel, and you can see her passion for this subject matter and that she has really done her homework. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Abel. We really appreciate you. I'm sure that we'll probably be getting comments and we may want to have you back on the show again. Would you be willing to come back?
Sure.
Okay.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
I put her on the spot. She can't say nothing but yes. That's all right. No. Thank you so much. And for those of you that are out there listening, again, if you find that this information is valuable to you, please, just like you would share a great restaurant or a great recipe, share it with someone that you care about. All right? And I will see you next week. And in the meantime, peace. I hope you enjoyed this episode. The best gift that you could give me is to share this podcast with family and friends. And don't forget to review it. That way, this podcast will grow organically. If you need to reach out to me, please check out my Facebook page, DM me there, or you can email me at godskow@gmail.com. We have upcoming Bible studies that we would love for you to join us in, or if there is a guest or someone that you would like to see me interview on this podcast, please let me know. We are here to work together to realign our lives. Until the next episode, take care, and I look forward to sharing more and more with you as we realign our lives. Peace until next week.